على سيدنا مولانا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا مولانا محمد وبارك وسلم وصلي عليه. الصلاة والسلام عليك يا سيدي يا حبيبي يا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آلك وأصحابك يا رحمة للعالمين. الصلاة والسلام عليك يا نبي الله. الصلاة والسلام عليك يا شفيع الله. الصلاة والسلام عليك يا شفيع الأمة. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh to one and all, and especially to our guest speaker tonight, who is Brother Abdul Rahim Ali Jafar, and the additional names as Aka, commonly known as Bani, to the community. So Alhamdulillah, Shukr, we've been blessed tonight to do some history again in our community. And we had a brief discussion saying that our elders most of the elders are basically gone, who have left the dunya. Allah Pak grant them Jannatul Firdaus. Ameen. And it's about time we start doing something to preserve the history. So this is part of that. So I'm not going to take too much of time. I'm going to hand over to Brother Abdul Rahim Ali Jafar to discuss basically the history of the Laudium Brigade in conjunction with the Ratieb and Khadaat group. Inshallah. Tafadul, brother.
Assalamu alaikum. Jazakallah for having me. About last week, I think it's common knowledge there was a mate in the family, and unfortunately we couldn't do the program. I couldn't attend the program, and sorry about that. Nevertheless, here we are tonight. So the request was for us to look at the history and the origins, if my understanding is correct, specifically about the Pretoria Muslim Youth Brigade. It's commonly just known as the Brigade in Pretoria, and how that ties into the reading of what is known as the Ratieb And Khadaat, or just the Khadaat as we call it, and then also the Ratieb Rifai, which is popularly termed just the Ratieb. It's probably an incorrect term, but I think the term is meant fondly. As Samir has correctly said, we've lost a lot of our elders, and we also at the membership of the brigade are beginning to realize that we've never really taken the time to pen our history, and we don't have a historian, as it were. I suppose, probably in honesty, if there's anybody who knew as much about the history of the brigade, it would have been the late Suleiman or Solibai Bamji. We also lost him a few months ago. And unfortunately, we didn't take the time to retain or record the information which he had an abundance of. Your request has actually now spurred us on to start looking at that in regard to all three organizations or groups, the Brigade, the Khadaat, and the Ratieb, and try and probably confirm where exactly the organization, what spurred it on, what gave rise to the creation of it, who the people were involved in the origination of the organizations exactly. And what we do know is that there's a lot of photographic history around amongst the families. A little bit of it is emerging, and hopefully maybe this program tonight can serve as an impetus for those people who do have both information and actually photographs to probably make them available. I know there's always people guard those photos jealously, and I can understand that. But without technology today, I mean, it's just a matter of us making a digital copy, and we can try and share that. So to start off with the brigade itself, I want to say this from the outset. More than likely, I'm going to neglect to mention, not intentionally, of course, a lot of important names, purely because I have no recollection of them at all. And they were obviously key people in the formation of the brigade. The information I'm going to provide is relatively anecdotal and based on my recollection and what I know of the brigade. Obviously from a Jafar family stance. And just for those of you who may know me, you'll know that I was born in Laudium. So unlike probably some of our guests and most of my siblings and the rest of our family that hailed from the old location, as we call it, Marabastad and Claremont, they would have memories that I obviously don't have. So a lot of what I know is what was related to me commonly, as we discussed casually. So some of the records that we have indicate that the brigade was officially formed in to commemorate Pakistan Day, and this took place in August of 1947. That's earliest some of the documents that we have. The people involved, or maybe before we get to that, the reason behind the formation of the brigade, I believe, was that we obviously had strong ties to Pakistan at the time and probably still do now. And many of our forefathers hailed either from Pakistan or India, the subcontinent. And my grandfather specifically came from Mapro. So there were strong ties to subcontinent. And I think one of the motivations was to establish an organization or a group that was representative in many ways of the people in the area. And if I look back to some of the names that were mentioned and some of the families, well, not actually some of the families, all of the families, and some people tell us that at some point or other, almost every original family from the old location in Claremont at some point or other had a family member as a member of the brigade. So I think the brigade was formed to, as I said, to commemorate the Pakistan Day at the time. And there were also ties from what I heard to Old Mia's farm, for those of you who remember. Many of the families had children who attended the school there, and they did have a cadet group and a cadet band. So there was obviously crossover between the two. The family names that are prominent in the formation of the brigade, obviously, was the Jaffer family, my father. Then there was the Valley families, the Khans, the Saints. The truth of the matter is, there were many families, and unfortunately, that information may still be available, but it's not known to me. But I know that when you talk to some of the older people, almost every family, as I said earlier, had involvement with the brigade, either as active members or as patrons or just general supporters. The brigade was very popular in the old location, and fortunately, many of the younger generation hailed from those families still today. And if you look at some of the photos and you look at some of the ethnic background of the founding members of the brigade, I think what was beautiful about that, it just struck me when I was looking at an old photo earlier. And I know it used to be an important thing and maybe still is in some quarters today. The founding members came from all the different sections, if I can call it, whether it was Memon, Cockney, Surti, Ajam, whatever. And obviously, as time went by and the intermarriages took place and so on, some people don't even identify with it anymore. But be that as it may, I think it was a true representation of the entire Muslim community. And also particularly in the old location, there was what I believe to be a Malay quarter and the Cape Coloured section. So there was a cross-section of all the communities. Because particularly Maravastad was a melting pot of all of those different communities, and those people who lived there and the little experience I had in the area, it was wonderful experiences. And I think the brigade sort of represented the coming together of all of those different people from different backgrounds, particularly in the Muslim community. Also, I think it was, to some extent, a response to the formation or the existence of other marching bands. There was a colored band which I think still exists in certain areas. It was called the Paladins, predominantly a church-based marching band. Also interesting to note that at one point there was a Hindu brigade in Pretoria. I'm not too sure of the history, but there was definitely a Hindu marching band, pretty similar to the Pretoria Muslim Youth Brigade. And I think, despite the fact that it is a Hindu band, part of our culture, and we should maybe at some point also just look a little more into that. Just as a representative of the cross-section of communities that had lived in the old location. At the same time, what we saw is that in other parts of the country, particularly in the Western Cape, until today, there's a Habibia Muslim band. At one point in Uitenhage, there was the Uitenhage Marching Lads. For a long time, Benoni had a marching band, a Muslim band as well. And Durban, we now see there's a revival of a Muslim marching band, but previously, around the time the PMYB was formed, Durban also had a Muslim marching band. To the point that we actually now have, and have had for many, many years, the South African Council of Muslim Bands. We're not so many now anymore. And then, of course, we've encountered the Lenasia Muslim Brigade. They've also been around for quite a while. It's interesting to note that some of the initial membership were ex-members from Pretoria who relocated to the Joburg and then Lens area. And then obviously participated in the formation of the Lens Brigade. We obviously have a sort of sibling rivalry with the Lens Brigade, but it's a good relationship. And as I said, the brigade was then formed from a cross-section of all the different groups in the old location. To the best of what I could find out, the impetus to form the brigade was part of the liberation of Pakistan at the time. And it was in answer to the existing of other similar groups. And the Mias Farm angle was also an important part, since a lot of the Pretoria children at the time attended there and learned to march. Just a little on the style of the brigade. It's there are different types of marching bands, and we are a military style marching band, as it were. Our instruments, I think, have become popularly identifiable these days with the videos and people that have seen us. The uniform, as you see it now, has been in existence from the old location. I believe that its original formation, probably for a year or two, the original uniform was a khaki color, probably based on availability at the time. And eventually the colors that you see us wearing now, which is the Air Force blue pants with the red stripe, white shirt, red tie, and the very popular red kufia, as we call it, has been there since it started, really. The moon and star that we wore on the kufia, incidentally, comes directly from Pakistan. If you had the chance to look at one closely, you'll notice that the kalima is inscribed on it. And then, of course, the color combination has pretty much stayed the same throughout the years. And with the formation of the band, the membership were already people who were involved in zikr. And it wasn't actually a separate effort in terms of what led to became the Khadaat Jama, the people who were already reading Khadaat. So the Khadaat, as some people may have researched it, was actually a piece of work written by Ibn al-Khadaat in around about 1100. And the word the Ratieb or Tartib just refers to the order. So basically the what was put together to become what is known as the Khadaat today was written by this person, and it has been read pretty much around the world. It became very popular in the Indonesia area at the time, years ago. And as we know, the slaves from Indonesia, Sheikh Yusuf and Makassar, they were in exile to the Cape, the first prisoners on Robben Island. They then brought with them this work. However, we also know that the work is also read in the subcontinent, and for many of us, having forefathers from the subcontinent. It really came together from the various areas. The slight difference, I think, over the time has come with the tune specifically. Now, the type of Khadaat that we read, if I can call it that, is Malay-based, particularly in terms of the tune or the style, if you want to call it that. And how that took root in the old Pretoria, there were obviously many Malay people living in the area at the time. So reading the Khadaat is part and parcel of life. It's something that was read actually daily, and that's how it was written, intended to be read. And I think that continued in the area, specifically the formation of the Jama'ah. My family is we have mixed background, mixed parentage, and my grandfather was directly from April, as I mentioned, and he came to South Africa, met and married a Malay auntie, whose family was, of course, reading the Khadaat at the time. And the Khadaat itself was being read by other families. It's not an exclusive thing to our family, of course. And given how these things grow, the different families involved in this, particularly saints and khans, and there were many more. The names elude me now, and some of them I just don't know of. But the Khadaat continued and started in the old location. I remember as a child going to on Sundays especially, and the Jama'ah used to be big. It was massive, 70, 80 people at the time. And around about 1962, the Laudium was proclaimed as an area. My father was quite involved in local politics, and we were the 10th family, as I understand it, to move to Pretoria. I was the first child to be born here. Nevertheless, when we relocated here, obviously the need for reading Khadaat, which is popularly read Juma night or Thursday night, was a request for reading in Laudium specifically increased. And some of the people who then relocated to, of members of the Jama'ah who relocated to Laudium specifically, we would just have one Jama'ah, one big Jama'ah. But over time, it became expedient for the people living in Laudium of the Khadaat members to just read here, whilst the people living in location continued to read there, which allowed for the Khadaat to spread. But as these things go, the dynamics of any group, human nature, the Jama'ah sort of, I wouldn't say split, it just sort of splintered out of necessity. And over the years, we had what essentially became not two different Jama'ahs, the same Jama'ah with just two divisions, if you like. Eventually, of course, everybody moved across here. Some people moved across to Eerstere, some of the family members, and they continued in that area. Then an interesting fact, which then gave rise to the Ratieb. The Ratieb itself was also being practiced also from our family members from the Indian subcontinent, but also particularly amongst the Malay community. And in early, I've got a recording where it was dated in 1956 specifically, where Imam from Bosmont, he's late now, late Imam Khafili, I think is commonly known amongst many in our community as well. He's very popular at the time. He hailed from Cape Town originally and was a serving Imam in Bosmont Mosque. And as it turned out, my father and brother were electricians, some people may know, did some work at the mosque at the time. And also, Imam Khafili was involved in pastoral services for the prison service at the time. And if you may recall, we had a death sentence in South Africa some years ago, and that was carried out at the prison in Pretoria. And that there were obviously unfortunate cases where Muslims were sentenced to death. So Imam Khafili would come from Joburg to offer his pastoral services to them and the families if they came from outside Pretoria, particularly Cape Town or other areas. There obviously were other areas. At the time, there's a apartheid time, things were very difficult. those families that came here had really nowhere to go when they came to spend the last few days with a family member. And through the encounter with my father and my uncle, Isham Jafar, um, sort of a loose arrangement was made where those families would sort of stay with us for a few days and then go back home when one had to happened. And that relationship then grew, and Imam Khafili was very, very much involved in the Ratieb Al Khadaat as well. And through that relationship, through the prison services and providing some assistance to the families, the relationship was established between our family and the Muslim community, as it were. And that sort of heralded the beginning of the Ratieb in our area. So Imam Khafili would come through many times. We have some very old recordings, like I said, still on reel tape. We're trying to get them onto CD. That date back to the early 1950s and so on. And on one particular recording, we see where the permission is given from, or we hear the permission is given from Imam Khafili to our Jamaat to carry on and conduct the Ratieb and other zikr programs. So that was more or less the, I wouldn't say the original origin, but more the formalization of us doing the Ratieb work in Pretoria. We still function very closely with the Bosman Jamaat. And so in a nutshell, the brigade, as I said, was formulated as early as 1947. And the membership already comprised of people that were reading the Khadaat. It wasn't a new thing. It actually predated the brigade. The formalization of the Khadaat on one of our kitabs, I see we have established 1962. I believe it was well before that. But just the idea that it was formalized is noted as 1962. And that would be around about the time of the establishment of Laudium as a township. The Ratieb, as I said, was before it. So in honesty, it's not really a distinct, separate organizations. They coexisted, or they existed within the same one group. Obviously, with some people emphasizing a little more participation in the brigade and others more in the Ratieb and others more in the Khadaat. For myself, I'm actively involved in all three, and over the years I was trained by Imam Khafili to read the Ratieb, and so yeah, it's just commonly called a Khalifa. It's also an improperly used term. Khalifa means teacher, as we know, but over the years the word Khalifa is synonymous with the person who leads the Ratieb Jama. I was trained to do that by Imam Khafili, and unfortunately, though, the Ratieb has seen a bit of a decline. For several reasons, I think mainly membership. And then maybe this is also an opportunity for us to talk about the recruitment into all three of the different groups. Currently in Laudium, we also still don't see the brigade and the Ratieb and the Khadaat as distinct separate groups. The membership is come from one core group of people. But there's definitely a decline in membership across all three different activities, if I can put it that way. So we're always looking for people to participate and join, and maybe this opportunity would allow us to reach out to the youngsters. For those of you who've seen the brigade lately, you'll notice that our members are aging, and yeah, it gets a bit difficult to keep and retain members with so many other activities around today. Again, I know I've said this in the beginning. I want to say it again. I want to apologize for not being able to pay homage and commemorate more people by name specifically. I know there were many families, and there are many very prominent members of our own location community who were really the heroes of the organization that led to its formation. Unfortunately, I wouldn't say it's lost. We just haven't been able to compile it effectively, and we are going to be working on that. So I also want to use this opportunity to as far as this program can reach, for those members who We had family members or know, and they have documents or photos, whatever, any memorabilia. Please contact us. Let us try and get together to create, if not to restore, some form of bibliography of the brigade, and then obviously from there the other organizations that arose from that. On the Khadaat specifically, I think it's well known in Laudium at the moment that, or not only for the moment, for a long while, it turns out my neighbor Eli also heads up a Jamaah, which is actually originally part of the same Jamaah. It splintered into three at one stage, actually, and purely out of a need. We had people asking for a Khadaat, because we'll read for a wedding, we'll read for a mayat, 3-day work or 40 days and so on. And over time, the demand increased, and it became necessary to have, to attend more than one Thursday night work. So the splintering of the Jamaah was actually meant for us to have a wider reach. But as I also mentioned earlier, human dynamics come into play, and over time, the group sort of splintered into their own identity. But in truth, irrespective of who reads a Khadaat in Pretoria, it originates from the same place, from the same group of people that started it that many years ago. And actually at one stage we had 4 Jamaat. And depending on what the bookings were like, we would sometimes just join Jamaats to read together. I know I haven't been able to give you a lot much more, probably more than you expected, on the origins of the band and the Khadaat. But I think maybe this is a starting point for us to be able to delve into our history, and for those people who do know more than I've been able to mention tonight, they could make themselves available or make that information available. We can share that as well. I think it's a very valuable part of our history and heritage, and we should cherish that and not let it become forgotten. And things being as they are now, we're losing more and more people who have that knowledge. So if again, my appeal is on behalf of all 3 organizations, if there are people available, please try and make that information available to us. We will come to you to obtain whatever, even if it's this verbal information, we'll note it, and down the line, our intention is to put it into some document form that we can retain. I don't know if there are any questions or anything else you may want to know, Samir.
I think Jazakallah firstly for your time. Really appreciate it. And like we said initially, the history of our community, if we don't start sitting together now as a community, we are going to lose that information. So I agree and accept what you just said, because that's the idea and the intention of starting off these programs, to try and go out, let the word go out to say whoever has information or knows something, for example, of the brigade or the Khadaat or the Ratieb group, and for that sake also with the Maulud group for that matter,
Yeah.
So we're going back to all of these organizations. We did have an interview with the Maulud group. So I think we're all faced with exactly the same situation. The reality is, if we don't formalize and put something together for this community now, then we're really going to lose out, because there's still an opportunity now to be able to collect information, like I said, put something together, prepare a library for this community with our history itself. And we can do it. So I think from my side, there isn't much. I just like to say that this is the starting point of this. Is going to go out as a YouTube video, obviously. So we will circulate it, and I urge you also to circulate it amongst your family members, your friends, and encourage the family members and Khadaat Ratieb groups to join this platform, because what we're trying to do is not keep it for ourselves, try to grow it and make sure that this specific class on a Wednesday night is more family class, so we can learn about our community, learn about Deen, and actually see the people that we are communicating with and having on this forum, so we can build a strong and a better community. So from my side, I would say Jazakallah again. I don't know if any of the other participants on there, like we've got Masood Bhai, we've got Ibrahim. Anybody's got any questions? anything that you'd like to ask? Okay, so it doesn't seem like there is anything. So I'm just going to end off with the Quran verse as instructed. You know, like Maulana says, we must put in something. وَأَتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا. It's a common verse, everybody knows it. And it means basically hold firm to the rope of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to not be divided. And this is exactly the crux of the matter in this community. So whether we from the Khadaat or from the Ratieb group or from the brigade or from the Mawlud group, whether we are Shafi or Hanafi or Qaqi or Mamun or Surti, the important thing for us is our deen and our Aqidah. So I think let's hold firm to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's book and the Sunnah of Rasulullah Pak sallallahu alaihi wasallam. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us, protect us, and inshallah we'll hope to see everybody next week soon again. Shukran jazilan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam.